Kevin Wellfare. It only takes a spark. It only takes a spark. Kevin Wellfare.
A spark is an amazing thing. So small and seemingly insignificant, yet it is the launching point for every major shift since the world began. With a small spark, man harnessed fire. With a small spark, the Atlas V rocket ignited and we landed on the moon. And it was the small spark of an idea that led to the founding of the United States of America. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters and guests, I have a friend and colleague named Janet. Janet is a spark. Whenever my fire for work begins to burn low, I need only visit with Janet and her spark reignites me. Several years ago, I had the honor of attending the oath ceremony where Janet and her husband Ken became citizens of the United States. Immigrants from Malaysia, Janet and Ken worked and studied to be part of this country. So I found myself in a cramped room, not only witnessing the oath of Janet and Ken, but also those of many, many others. It was a moving and humbling experience to see so many sparks ignite that day. That room was ablaze, believe me. I wondered, how many of us burn with that same intensity? Especially those of us that didn't have to earn citizenship. Do our fires burn bright, or have the flames gone down? I grew up in Oklahoma City and attended John Marshall High School in the late 1970s. Earlier in that decade, Oklahoma City, like many other public school systems, grappled with how to racially integrate their schools. Through redistricting and busing, we found our campuses more diverse, and I'm a far better person for it. In my sophomore year, though I didn't truly realize the honor at the time, the amazing Clara Luper was my U.S. history teacher. For those who don't know, Clara Luper was a pioneer in the civil rights movement who worked tirelessly to overturn segregation policies, most notably at Katz Drug Store in downtown Oklahoma City. On August 19, 1958, Clara Luper, her 2 children, and 11 youth between the ages of 6 and 17 entered Katz Drug Store, sat down at the lunch counter, and asked to be served. As expected, they were refused and the police were called. Amid hostility and threats, they staged their peaceful protest. They sat there for hours, enduring jeers and taunts and being spit on. And then they came back the next day. It was the first and longest sit-in of the civil rights movement. 2 days later, Katz management desegregated its lunch counters, not only in Oklahoma, but in 3 other states as well. Now, during my high school years, we didn't have African American History Month. Instead, we had Black History Week. What it really amounted to were a few announcements and an assembly. Now, as I mentioned, Mrs. Luper was my history teacher, so she told our class that during the assembly, that we would put on a play depicting Rosa Parks' refusal to sit at the back of the bus, and she asked me to play the owner of the bus company. Well, I was all in because it was, after all, a juicy role. That is, until I realized in my dialogue I was supposed to use that most derogatory term, the N-word. I was a short, white drama kid. And I really didn't need the added threat of violence to my already tenuous high school experience. So as I approached Mrs. Luper to tell her, hey, I simply couldn't say that, she looked firmly at me and she said, Mr. Wellfare, you have to say it. You have to say it because it's the truth. And we must always hear the truth. So on the day of the performance, in front of a packed auditorium of fellow John Marshall Bears, who were mostly African American, I said it. As you can imagine, it didn't go over too well. However, at the end, Mrs. Luper came around the curtain and delivered an inspiring talk, not just about Rosa Parks' actions, but about the importance of never watering down the facts lest they change the meaning of the events. Clara Luper was a spark both nationally and in my own life. But clearly, the work is not done. And lately, it seems that the flames of change are burning really, really low. Recently, I was in Washington, D.C. in the Peeps store. You know Peeps, right? Those marshmallow chicks and bunnies covered with brightly colored sugar crystals. In the store, I spotted a t-shirt with rows of different colors and kinds of Peeps on it with a saying beneath, "Inside, we're all the same." And it struck me what an amazingly true statement that is. And it ignited a spark in me. So now what? You see, the trouble with fire created from sparks is that when left unattended, they have a habit of burning down. If all we do is gather around the flame and take in the warmth without ever offering anything in the way of maintenance, they have a tendency to die down or die out altogether. And we have a tendency to move on. But that fire was really important. So how do we keep the flames from being extinguished? I think the answer is rather simple. Add more sparks. You see, more sparks not only help a fire grow, but spread. Imagine, what might it look like if we all committed to being sparks like Clara Luper and my friend Janet? What might that look like in our relationships, in our communities, in our world? Maybe, just maybe, we might find ourselves in a more equal and just society. One where we don't forget or ignore the flames of the past. One where we don't need hashtag movements because we've never lost sight of the truth that we all have intrinsic value. And as in the wisdom written on the Peeps t-shirt, we're all the same on the inside. Fellow Toastmasters, today I throw out this challenge to all of us. Be a spark. Be a spark for your neighbor. Be a spark at your job. Be a spark for those who don't know how today, but will if you'll only show them. If we can do that, if you and I can do that, then we will set this world ablaze with a fire that will never burn out. It only takes a spark. Mr. Toastmaster.